Welcome back, episode 5, where I'm continuing on with my wing build. There's lots of stuff to cover. Before I get going, I'm going to show a couple images. Hate to call them artist renderings because there's no art involved. I took the paint templates supplied by Kitfox, put them in paint, and I took some images of the Verner radial. I'll put them in there so kind of get a glimpse of what my aircraft should look like. I think they're kind of cool. Let me know what you think. This stack of ribs right here is ready to go on my left wing. I've sanded all of these with 220 and they're ready to go. This stack up here is all just out of the box, still need to be sanded for my right wing. Quick shot that I referred to in the last video. This is an example of the the Kitfox Series 5 wings where they could go with the full-size tanks, wing lockers, and the different wing quick change wing tips. None of that's for me. And my familiar by now wing spar setup fixture. I have the manual for the Series 7 laid out here because this is the cleanest view. Shows my 37.5, 55 1/4 spacing, so forth. This is rib number 3, working our way out to 10. 1 gets placed after we drill up the wing on the fuselage, and 2, still a mystery to me, but I'm pretty sure I know what happens since the fuel tank goes there. So I did the measurements, just started with a Sharpie pen. Can't use a pencil on these spars because the graphite from the pencil will cause corrosion. 1/2-inch spacer block, aft spar. All of the dimensions in the manual actually come off of this face for the aft spar, and you have to add a 1/2 inch for the forward spar. But I thought after I got them laid out, I'd make a sanity check in case my horse math is no good. And so that one's pretty good. Number 3, 4, and so on. Rib number 5, I'm getting into the area where the rivets are. So this is the first one. I'll have to make some little notches so the aft spar will go over these ribs. Not too worried about that. 6, 7, and 8 are the other ones which will also need to have those notches. And when I finally get to 9 and 10 out here, again, here's my 1/2-inch stagger. I believe this piece gets cut off, but only after the whole wing is all framed up. So I might come up with some way to make these go all the way around and still stay square to the center line of the tube. And then you're supposed to make lines that are an 1/8 inch staggered on either side that represent the thickness of that shear web in the ribs. I had to go through and realign the spars because I wiggled them back and forth, especially for that aft one, to get the ribs into place over the top of all those rivets. And one of the limitations I found is at rib number 6. This one. This rivet lies right on the line. The one on the other side over here is directly in the middle of the line. The notches I had were arbitrary, which was fine for getting them on here. But with this one being right on this set of rivets, I'll have to put in 2 more notches. So I'll label every one of these with their address. Fix that one, put them back on here. That's an easy problem. The next one turned out to have an easy solution, but last night was one of those forehead slapper moments I should have seen coming a mile away. And that was that the spar goes through the middle of the rib, and my fixture was designed so that the tube sits directly on this 4-inch face, 3.5-inch face of this 2x4, and it wouldn't allow the rib to go on here without messing things up. So pull this out because I got an extra one. These are some aftermarket motorcycle parts I made, windshield spacers. They're CNC cut, quite accurate in thickness, and so some of those extra parts came to the rescue here. You can see I have one, and this is the spot I was worried they weren't going to work, but it actually came out just fine. My 1/2-inch spacer block for washout. Then I have the nylon block here, UHMW actually, and that allows my rib to float exactly like it's supposed to. Put one under all 4 corners, so everything's going to be fine. And where I thought you would bond all the ribs in place, come back, put in the drag, anti-drag, that's not how it works at all. They're going to sit in here clamped. I've got some parts on the way. I did order all new parts. I was going to salvage the ones off of my scrap wings at the hangar, but all new parts is fine. They come in a long piece. You cut them in half. It'll mount one here, and then there's some aluminum tubes which connect them. So they go from rib number 3. The aluminum tube will pass through this oval-shaped slot that you can see in every one of these ribs. Go out to rib number 5, and then to the other side of rib number 5, again through the oval slot, rib number 7, through number 8, to rib number 9, and then there's some short braces. This random assortment was what I thought was the rest of the ribs I was going to need for this project. I was just looking at rib number 1 here. I'm actually going to have to verify that there isn't a specific part number for rib number 1, but I don't think there is. This is, again, a Series 5 type of rib where it used the D-shaped wooden molding instead of the 3/8 diameter aluminum tube. I could mix and match these at this point because those aluminum stringers stop here at rib number 3 because they can't pass through the fuel tank, obviously. And then I think you just use wooden blocks out here to space up for those false ribs. Since this particular rib doesn't get bonded at this point, I'll be able to use this same rib over when I frame up the right wing. These ribs look like they'd work. They pretty much are the same as the other one, although back then the ribs had 2 different types. 27001 was a plain rib, and a 27002 was intended to have the hinge brackets installed on them. They use these aluminum doublers that get bonded in here, whereas the newer style, there's an aluminum piece which gets bonded in here and is its own doubler, and then the brackets on the outside are a lot smarter. I will show them side by side when I get those in my hands. And where rib number 2 used to be a mystery to me, it turns out to have, looks like part of them. This piece goes on the tail, rear spar, passes underneath the fuel tank. Still not sure what I'm supposed to do for the top part. I would think it would just be some more bare strip like that, and then some spacer blocks. Template for the leading edge is in here, so that's good. Didn't know I needed one. And then I have the false ribs. These are the ones for the bottom. They're a little bit shorter for the top. They bond to the spar, and then they just sit on top of the 3/8 inch aluminum stringer. Now earlier I said something about bonding the ribs in place and then doing the drag anti-drag, and I said that's not what takes place. So here's what does take place. You get those fittings laid out, the holes drilled, deburred, clecoed, everything's in place, and then you come back and bond everything. Now ideally that would take place in one big sweep, but that'd be a lot of high stress, multiple batches of high sol. Probably going to break down and buy one of those mixing guns with the tips that you throw out when you're done. This is probably going to be a great place to use up a lot of those. I'm sure I'm going to come up with some kind of a technique where I can bond these in so that they don't move after the drag anti-drag tubes are located in place, and those are high soled and riveted. And then I'll be able to come back a little bit less stress and do all the fillets that go around where the ribs attach to the spars. It's one of the reasons I like to put parts together ahead of time, see how they go and what I'm up against. I happen to have this scrap of 3/8 inch diameter tube goes in here, and I just got out some of my false ribs, obviously for the top of the wing. You can see where they just get bonded on here, and they really just sit on top. They also get bonded, but there's no notching or anything. I have to check that they are all the same height, because sometimes I think you need to relieve underneath the edge to make them all work out, or sand them down. Their purpose is pretty easy to understand. I built a bunch of model airplanes, and I know in these areas where there's a lot of curvature to the shape, as the fabric shrinks, it tends to draw down inside each of these areas, and then it kind of wastes all the effort you put into putting in a nice airfoil. So these false ribs support the fabric in between those bays, top and bottom, and then once it gets the airflow gets back past here, the amount of curvature change isn't as significant and flattens out towards the back. UPS driver came by my house a little while ago, dropped off my trailing edge material, drag anti-drag tubes, which are already cut and deburred. These are the weldments, the drag anti-drag fittings, which get riveted and bonded to the wing spars. I guessed correctly that in the manual where it shows you getting them like this and you saw them in two, deburr and everything, that they would at least come from the factory already cut, because there are none of them which are used full length this way. These are not deburred, but that's an easy job. These are steel, sticking to my magnet there on the refrigerator and CAD plated, so that's all good. Alright, so it just happens to be my rib number 3. Again, all these are just flopping around in place, but I have these doublers. I have one in my pocket here. This is what they look like, simple brick form. These are aluminum. That's where they go. And this flange right here mates to the underside of the cap strip. There's one on either side. So from here, these doublers would get bonded, drilled, riveted, and then you come back and drill these holes through here. This last one will be a little interesting. The trailing edge material will be here. I'm not sure exactly how that goes, but I'm not too worried about it. There should be a uniform gap right here because, let me show you, this is one of the actual hinges from the flapper on, and that's the hole spacing which I need to maintain, which is pretty easy in this case. So let's go back and look at a Kitfox 5, because that's what this is. And again, these ribs were different. This is the one that's intended for hinge brackets. You bond these aluminum doublers in here on both sides. This side's a little easier to see them. And then the brackets, I have 2 of them. There's upper, lower. They're clamped into position. And you're supposed to rivet them at the base. Well, you can see already this hole pattern, which was so easy on the new style Series 7, to mate up with that. A little more difficult here. And the job is even more difficult than that because when you just clamp the pieces together, you can see the angle doesn't match the airfoil at all. So you have to coordinate, you have to get the angle to fit, keep these flanges down here pretty flat so that they can rivet effectively, and you have to maintain this hole pattern. And this is, again, just one, tip it up here, one set of brackets. There'd be a mirror image butted up against it if I had them all out here and a couple more hands. I would follow those instructions, but I'm out. This is too difficult to maintain this exact spacing on a pair of brackets on this rib, let alone for 4 on each wing. Kind of challenging. So this is plenty of work for me. Kind of looking forward to using these. So of course these are the pieces I've been waiting all week for. These are these aluminum drag, anti-drag tubes which are going to go in here. These little weldments. Got to locate everything, clamp it all in position. Of course, all my spars have been rotated, so they're perfectly upright. Ribs will be positioned and clamped, and I will start drill, deburr, cleco. All of these will be in position, so that will be kind of a cool project. Lots of holes to drill. Hopefully, no extras. I'm gonna end this episode right here. It's plenty, I think. Try to keep these videos under 10 minutes. So thank you for watching. And we'll see you on episode 6.